Asa-Punk, Asa-Punk, he's not radioactive, he's Asa-Punk in 2020. Hilson, folks. Hilson, folks, I'm in the dark, because it's almost bedtime, but I feel like editing anyway. So today's video is something that I compiled on my computer. Some of these things are a few years old. But basically, there are some thoughts I had about sword design and how sometimes swords that don't really look alike have a lot more in common in overall design than you might think. So here we start with a Filipino bolo I own, which has a blade not dissimilar to some European falchions, but much smaller. However, if we take that blade and flip it and mirror it and make two of them, it becomes very leaf-like. If we extend that leaf out somewhat, stretch it out, we get essentially the same blade profile as many Greek swords. And if you notice, the Filipino bolo is also like the blade, although not cantered forward, like a falcata, macaria, or copus. Here we have a Roman plumbata, a war dart. They often kept 3 behind their shields from what I understand and lobbed them at opponents, and the weight would carry it in. I've been told that they'd throw one up in the air coming down and one straight forward at a shield, so you had a choice, defend your head or body, but you could not do both. And here we have a Japanese war dart, used by samurai. I don't know much about them. They have a yari-style head from what I've seen. Looks like a slight weight to them, and they use eagle feathers instead of wooden flights, but I imagine they were used fairly similarly. Here we see 2 men from the Zulu tribe in southern Africa performing a traditional training exercise known as Zulu stick fighting. Notice the smaller version of the Zulu shield with a parrying stick held behind it and the club as the offensive weapon. And here we have a European diagram from, I'm guessing, probably 13, maybe early 1400s, that shows something that kind of looks similar. I don't know if the techniques would be similar, but certainly smaller shields with a parrying stick attached and a club as a weapon. Both the Zulu stick fighting and the European fighting with club and shield, which may have been a duel or something, look similar to these shields, buckler-type shields, of Chinese origin that Scalagrim showed recently on his channel. For this next comparison, I'm taking a Korean straight-bladed sword, which is similar to a katana in many ways, and mirroring the blade, doubling it again as I did earlier, to show that the basic blade profile is very similar to certain types of Greek swords, and also later migration and Viking-era swords. Now for one of my favorite comparisons, a comparison between a katana and a European arming sword. Most people think these swords are very different, and although a katana is usually thicker in cross-section, if you take a katana blade and mirror it, you essentially get the shape of some arming swords. And yes, some arming swords, while straight, do have curved edges. As we can see in this example here, that does have curved edges, which you can see well when I add the lines to illustrate just how curved the edges on that arming sword are. Lastly, we will talk about the similarities between the Viking long sacks, Langan sacks, on top, and the Tibetan key tree. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced, but that's how it's spelled. But for all I know, it could be kai tri. I don't speak Tibetan, but I do know that it looks an awful lot like a Viking Langan sacks in blade profile. It does differ in that it's more of a disc-shaped guard, and the pommels are slightly different. It's usually more ornate, but there's no denying that these two swords are very similar. And while many are more familiar with the Viking Langan sacks these days, if you Google key tree, or however it's pronounced, you'll find that there are many swords that are quite varied in decorations, but all seem to pretty much resemble Viking Langan sacks. Hilson, and good night, folks. Quit waiting for an invitation. I said good night, folks.